Hello, folks. Well, you seeing this means that the arduously long Frontier Americana trip is over. This was official coverage project tour number 9. And I think, well, I don't just think, I know, this was the longest trip to date. It took me 11 weeks, and as you're seeing this, it's taking far greater for the entire trip, video by video, to be published. Yeah, it's taken a lot of time just for the entire trip just to be published onto YouTube. Yeah, over the span of 2.5 months, we traveled through not just one, but several major regions in the United States. I think something like 15 or so states. Incredible. Yeah. I'm never doing something as long as that again. That was definitely an achievement for us here on the coverage project, but it's more of that been there, done that type of achievement than something we should really repeat. That was draining, and I'll tell you all about it, and I'm excited to get closure in filming this epilogue number 9. If you don't know what I'm doing, just walking here in the middle of the woods right now, talking about things that aren't actively related to any one location as I normally would, well, you're in for a treat. This is what I do after every major coverage project tour. There's a lot of stuff that is not seen on camera, and we, as a community, need closure. We need to reflect on the experiences on and off camera. Let me tell you, for this trip specifically, there was a lot off camera that I need to share with you all. But first, I gotta figure out, am I on the trail right now? It doesn't seem like it. We're in a very mystical, enchanting location right now, which I don't reveal. I find a period of time in between the next trip in the long series of coverage project tours, and I dedicate a day somewhere in that location. So here's a little bit of your first spoilers of this following tour. Okay, it seems like we're on track to getting back on the trail. I try to respect nature around me. You don't want to step in the places that aren't meant for people to step on, so we'll follow the designated trails as we begin. Epilogue 9. Now, in contrast to my previous epilogues, I just simply don't have time. This tour was so long, I can't list every single location, but I'll do my best to recap the different states and regions in a chronological order. But I really encourage you, most of all, just watch these videos before you resume Epilogue 9. Without watching the prior videos, the active location travel videos, it may be a bit confusing when I explain what has gone on. So I encourage you all, catch yourself up to date, watch as many before you resume this, so you and I both can be on the same page as we talk about the extra details in between these different videos. So I don't know what you're doing right now, continuing to watch this. Pause this video, go back to the Frontier Americana Tour playlist, watch enough videos so you feel yourself up to date, up to speed, so you feel comfortable enough watching this, listening to these stories with enough background. Oh my goodness. Well, I mean, this is a beautiful location, so I can't help but point the camera so you all get a glimpse of this as well. It's beautiful. But anyway, to recap the Frontier Americana Tour in its entirety, we started in the Midwest, Indiana, Illinois, going westward through Missouri, and we finally came to what would be considered the West, the Great Plains, Kansas, Oklahoma, delving south into Texas, and finally we got to see our first look at the true Old West character of America through West Texas, into New Mexico, Arizona, a lot of the Southwest. And I guess for the reasons that I'll be mentioning in the later part of this video today, you could consider that first stretch from the beginning to Arizona the first half, the first act, I guess, if you will, of this Grand Frontier Americana Tour. From Arizona, I went a bit northeast into Utah. Then we got to see that Four Corners region, the southwesternmost point of Colorado, up into Colorado's true heartland, the Rocky Mountains, and we got to see a lot of that Rocky Mountain countryside as we went north towards Wyoming, and then really went deep into the American Badlands of course, Wyoming, Nebraska, South Dakota. Those Black Hills were beautiful. Into Montana, another great western state. And then it was time for us to head back east on our final few legs of this grand Frontier Americana Tour through North Dakota. I love that state, honestly. I can't say enough good about North Dakota. It's a critically underrated state. Minnesota, where it really got kind of cold, but makes sense, it was the end of September. Down into Iowa, and finally into Wisconsin. A lot of states, a lot of new grounds that we covered on this one tour through that summer of 2022. It's a summer I truly will not forget, and I'm glad that I captured enough to share with you all a summer that I won't forget, and maybe you won't either. But I don't know, you guys have your own lives, so don't focus entirely on my experiences. Make the best of your life, make the most of your experiences. But I hope by sharing that life-changing summer, it brought a little bit of enjoyment to your lives, in a way, in any way I could. So that was the longest tour we've ever had on the Coverage Project. It's a long time, 10, 11, 12 weeks, I don't know exactly how much time it was, but it was enough time to go through a lot of experiences, a lot of great sights, experiences, interactions, new discoveries, but also a lot of challenges along the way. And I'm mostly going to highlight one major challenge on this epilogue video because I think that was the defining challenge of this tour in its entirety. And through those weeks, as July turned to August, as August turned to September, I had a lot of time just to sit at these campgrounds, think about what these experiences meant to me, how to put it all under a greater theme, right? So every tour, I try to learn a little bit of a lesson. That's the point of these epilogues, to grow as a person, to record and share what I've learned, a greater picture I've come to discover and reflect on. Because I guess this channel serves as an archive for this pivotal moment of my life. I try to learn as much as I can and share those lessons I've learned with you all. If you've ever gone to a bookstore or a library, or just have found a random book sitting somewhere, you'll know that there's a title and a subtitle, right? And although I try to make the lessons I learn a very clear and concise lesson, I think for this tour, it would have been great to give this a title and a subtitle for a lesson and then sort of a sub-lesson. What I mean by that is, most of the tours I've gone on, I've learned, okay, don't do this, or think in this way, but I think the Frontier Americana Tour deserves a moral and then something to sort of elaborate on it. Because it's one thing to be given a moral or a lesson to learn, but what's that mean in the context of your life? And so that's what I mean, that's what I'm trying to convey when I say the grand lesson that I learned on the Frontier Americana Tour was to understand my limits as a person. And here's the little subtitle of it. Don't be afraid to ask for help if you truly need it. So with that in the back of your minds, let me happily set the scene for you all. I think we gotta really go back to before this trip even began. I'm talking maybe a couple weeks before, when I still had everything in the works, but I was yet to even depart. I was at home and I was making plans, calling campgrounds, the usual thing that I have to do every time. As I was getting everything set up, I was, of course, conferring with my family and sharing details with friends and all that stuff. And I was having a discussion with my father, who I really look up to and is a great role model, and I often ask questions that help me gain better insight of my life and the world around me. I'm very thankful to have him as a role model. So for a lot of these travel experiences, I like to talk to him and understand a little bit more than what I'm thinking at the moment, to get a better perspective beyond just me as an individual. So one of those days I'm talking with my father, he sees my itinerary and he says, "Oh, I'm so happy for you." And I'm like, "Well, yeah, thanks, Dad. Yeah, don't you want to go traveling someday? Don't you want to see the world like I've been doing?" And he's like, "Not really. I think I've had my fill." But then he looks at where I'm going in Arizona, or maybe what I'm telling him at the moment, and he's like, "Well, you know, I've had my fill with travel, but if there's one place I do want to go to, just for that bucket list adventure, I would like to see the Grand Canyon." Now, what's this simple conversation have to do with the trip itself? It happened weeks before it began. Well, I didn't think it would have any effect either on any lesson I would learn or any greater thing that I discovered. But little did he or I know that little conversation would come full circle, let me tell you. But that's for later on in the hour. So as the date of departure began, I began thinking, well, I don't know, I've gone to, 28 states so far now. And I've gone through a lot of the country, but this is by far going to be the biggest challenge of visiting all 50 states. That was my goal. I have to visit all 50 states. It's a dream of a lifetime, and I'm achieving it so far. At a slow, gradual pace, but I'm getting there slowly. But I knew that this Frontier Americana Tour would either make or break me. It would either solidify my confidence in being able to achieve this goal, or I would come home saying, "You know what? No, not gonna travel anymore. I think I've had my fill, just like my father." Now, I was sure, I wasn't concerned that I would have the full capability to get through those weeks and weeks and weeks. But it was just such an unprecedented challenge in my life. It was the longest I would be traveling. It was the longest I would be all dependent on myself, on my own. And so, naturally, there's a little bit of intimidation that comes at play when you're faced with an obstacle in front of you. An exciting one, but still something that you've really never had to encounter with such a vehement difficulty. And so, of course, I, like any other human being, would want this long endeavor to be as easy as possible. I wanted a smooth ride. I did want to learn, but one never learns going through easy challenges. That's just not how the world works. People go through struggle, and they'll either be defeated or come out much stronger. Now, what was my setup through this whole journey across several states, several regions? Obviously, I needed something durable to last me those several weeks, right? Well, I'm not gonna be a big glamper with a flat screen TV and a 50-foot RV. No, I'm gonna be doing something that's the bare bones, minimalistic setup. Now, maybe it's my fault, but it's the only option I could have had, unless I wanted to wait a year or two just to save up the money, which I wasn't gonna do. I wanted to get this challenge done as soon as I could in my life. So I departed, just like any other trip, with my teardrop trailer, which, if I haven't mentioned, it's a nice, compact, small teardrop trailer. It's nothing much, but it gets the job done. What towed that was, believe it or not, just an ordinary sedan. It was a Volvo S80, as old as I was. And it already had 100,000 miles from its lifetime of use. That was before I started doing this 50-state traveling. And so, of course, thousands of miles more were added. And all of that in combination meant it wasn't the best option if I wanted to have a nice, strong motor. But what did I know? It worked for the last 7 or so tours, right? Surely this would just be a longer tour with the same type of driving conditions, right? Well, I was certainly mistaken, but coming to terms with what happened along this journey, I don't regret being mistaken about how durable my setup would be. So the first several days heading westward into the vast center of the country, things were fine. The sedan, the Volvo I was using, seemed to work okay. Around southern Illinois, it was a really, really hot day. I think that was the day I was in Cahokia Mountains. And it overheated to the point where I had to just shut the car off, wait an hour for it to cool down. Perhaps that was a major sign of bad things to come. Maybe I should have listened a little more carefully. Well, I couldn't turn back. I was already in Illinois, states away from my home. The only choice was to keep moving forward. I went through Missouri. I met two people who were very, very kind, invited me to one of those like campfire hospitality sessions, as I would refer to it as. You know, they invited me for a nice night over the fire, exchanging stories. Gus and Tara, if you're watching this ever, thank you. I enjoyed the meal. I also enjoyed the warmth of the fire, even though it was already a pretty hot and humid day. And that was the day I got stuck on Lake of the Ozarks with a broken kayak. I got my refund though. But I ventured ever more west, into Kansas, down into Oklahoma, and before I knew it, I was in Texas, one of the states that I really wanted to visit. It's huge. As they say, everything's bigger in Texas. And the hospitality was even greater than I could have imagined. I actually stayed with two people I met the previous autumn. I was in Kentucky somewhere, and a nice lady came up, and she was going from campsite to campsite, seeing if anybody would take interest in hearing, you know, the good word, I guess, evangelization, if you want to call it that. But overall, she invited me over and said, hey, if you're ever in Texas, we would love to have you over and for you to get the traditional Texas hospitality, right? So I took up the offer. It was months later. I didn't even know if she would have even remembered me from that one night, but she certainly didn't. I was very thankful because I got to see a much more intimate look at Texas culture than had I just stayed at campgrounds. So I'm very thankful. So thank you to Cindy and Don for the hospitality and the friendliness. You sure made my Texas leg ever more special. Are we at the end of the trail? No, that can't be. We still got plenty more of this long story left. Yeah, I gotta find a new trail. I'll be right back. Okay, you know what? I'm just gonna turn around. That's probably the best course of action. There's an adjacent trail here, which is just as long as this first one. So, continuing on with the story, after Texas, I went to New Mexico, and that was all fine and dandy. New Mexico is now one of my favorite states. People often ask, oh, what's your favorite state? And I don't have a favorite state. Each state has its own special quirks, but if there is one state I would totally recommend for just an all-around great cultural experience, it's New Mexico. Oh, and I almost forgot. I shouldn't have forgotten. This was another memorable event. In Palo Duro Canyon, I was right next to, on the campground, to a great large family. I think they were from like the south of Texas, somewhere around there. And they were just another example of a great, friendly family, welcoming. And they also gave me a full box of HEB cookies, these pecan cookies from this grocery store chain found in Texas. And any of you people from Texas will know, HEB, it's something else. It's pretty good. But yeah, people from, you know, the center of the country to the south of the country, Great Plains, that general area, it's just all good people. I don't know how else to explain it. Everyone's just so welcoming and warm. Something that is not all too common where I'm from in the Northeast, so it's always appreciated. Every example, every instance, it warms my heart. So thank you to Nancy, Autumn, and the rest of that family that I met in Palo Duro Canyon. Another memorable experience. So I went through New Mexico, reached Arizona, and I got down to Petrified Forest National Park. And that's where things started to take a turn for the worse. Now, don't get me wrong, I had a great day at Petrified Forest, one of my favorite national parks, an underrated national park, but it's what happened immediately after I got back into my Volvo from the park experience. As I was driving back to that proxy campground, maybe 30 minutes away, I got a check engine light. on my front panel. And anybody who's been through a check engine light experience knows that is not a good sign at all. It can mean a whole wide variety of things. For nearly an hour I was checking the manual, the guidebook, to see if there were any more specific diagnostic issues based on just the one signal I was getting. It could have ranged from something jammed in the motor to a full breakdown. I didn't know what was going to happen, so I decided that the next day, as I was heading towards the Grand Canyon, I would stop by in Flagstaff and meet up with a mechanic. Because, I didn't know what to do. I'm no car specialist. I want the expert to take a look at it. In fact, I think if I took a look at it myself, I'd probably mess up the thing worse than any existing problem that was going on. So having set up an appointment for the following day, I just hoped and hoped and hoped that nothing would be wrong. And so I carefully drove from around that petrified forest national park area, maybe a town of, I think it was Holbrook or something like that, all the way to Flagstaff. It was about an hour or so, and I was very careful not to incur any bumps or anything that would stir up anything in the front, because who knows what would happen. Just a mere bump could damage the whole thing. I don't know. When I got to Flagstaff, Arizona, the mechanic told me, sorry to say this, but your transmission is failing, and it's failing badly. This is a dire problem. I don't know if we should have you take the car any further. So I just received the worst possible news I could imagine. I wanted this whole Frontier Americana journey to be a smooth sail adventure, full of excitement, full of wonder, full of discovery. And I just received the news that my transmission was failing and I could no longer travel any real distance at all. I was still just trying to comprehend the mere idea that I was about to experience every road tripper's worst nightmare, being stuck, being stranded, without any sense of control. And anybody driving long distance realizes there's that minuscule possibility that something dire could happen. A car could break down, an accident could happen, something that would just paralyze one's plans for vacation or travel immediately and for who knows how long, an indefinite time. And of course, I had to reconcile with this disastrous news. At the farthest distance on the trip from home, the entire trip, right? So I was in Arizona, my home's in the Northeast. That's the furthest point on that Frontier Americana trip I was from anybody I knew. Yeah, it was all setting in. Just a sense of gloom and doom came over me that day, and I didn't know what to do. All around, there was just this feeling of, what do I do? Because I think it was like around the middle of the week, I gave myself a day or two just to get to the Grand Canyon, my next destination on this long string of destinations. So I had maybe 1 to 2 days to get accustomed to fix this dire problem in my mind. So when I received the news that it would have to be taken to a different facility because it's an old model and you need certain parts that are no longer being made as often, and overall it would take upwards to maybe a week to get everything fixed just to renew my journey. So at that time, it was the middle of the day. I was probably at the mechanic shop for around 2.5 hours, just seeing how I can get information about insurance, personal information, car registration stuff, all the boring transactional conversations like that, right? And it was not fun. It was definitely not fun. But it's just something you have to do in these circumstances. You can't control the outside world, but you can control how you view it. So it's almost like it was just a matter of, okay, what now? So questions were asked by me, I was given answers and all that. And so that was what went on for a good period of time. And I was just kind of exhausted at that point from all the emotional, mental exhaustion. So I took a few steps to my right, took a seat at the chair, and was just thinking on my phone for a couple seconds, and boom! The entire ceiling light fixtures crashed down onto the floor of the mechanic shop. One of the loudest sounds I've ever heard. Louder than any rock concert or anything. It was loud. And you would see glass shattering everywhere, debris all over the place. It was a bad mess. And I realized, oh my gosh, had I been standing 10 seconds longer there, who knows what would have happened to me? You know, I could have ended up in the ER. I don't know, right? For sure, I knew that the trip, as I knew it, far beyond any difficulty with this transmission issue on my car, the trip would be over as I knew it, far beyond any challenge. And so, for the next 10 minutes, I was just at that mechanic shop. I booked outside, walked a few blocks around the area, just almost hyperventilating. Like, oh my gosh, one of those... I don't know how to explain it other than that was the closest thing I've had to a life flashing before my eyes moment, in a way, because I knew I would have been gravely injured, at the very least. I'm a good child. I try to do the best I can for my family and for the sanity and well-being in their minds while I'm going on these weeks-long endeavors and stuff. I'm sure my family, thinks, okay, make sure you don't get yourself injured or killed, and little did they know what just happened, what just transpired a few minutes ago. All my father knows is that I sent him a text saying, there's a problem with transmission, I gotta get it fixed. So I call him and I say, you would not believe what happened just a few minutes ago. I feel lucky to be alive, and we talk for a bit, and then he says, I have a feeling you were pushed aside. Pushed aside? What does that even mean, right? Okay, all I'm doing is just walking a few steps away from that counter to take a seat, and then I see the whole infrastructure of the roof collapse, and I'm pushed aside? Yeah, I still don't know really what my father meant by that. Do I believe I was pushed aside by a greater force? I don't know, and I won't ever really know that for sure, even right now. But as a result of not just the transmission issue and all that, but the fact that I felt lucky to be alive and healthy and standing and able-bodied at that moment, I realized what my father meant partially. I guess I was meant, at that moment, to go through that challenge. I said at the beginning of the trip, this is gonna make or break me. Well, this was my opportunity to overcome this great obstacle in front of me. I didn't know at the time how long it would take. There's no certainty at all. At the moment, the only thing really going in my favor was a sense of certainty that the mechanic would offer to have me drive to the Grand Canyon. It was all downhill, and then pick the Volvo up, leaving me in just a trailer without any opportunity to travel beyond walking, right? At least I was guaranteed a spot at a campground, shelter, enough food in the rations I packed. But I knew on that day was the beginning of that challenge that I had to overcome for this trip. And by the end of it, whatever happened, I would have learned a great lesson through this hardship. That day was filled with so many events occupying my head, so many things to do, so many things to get done, just to make sure that all of my basic needs were met through the coming days. But once I finally got settled at the Grand Canyon campground, one of many, I realized another thing. And that was, on the surface level, I was given the worst possible luck, right? It was just the worst case scenario. But at the same time, I realized that below the surface, where it counts, I was very, very, very lucky that day, having survived whatever potential injuries I could have received. And for that, I knew that through the coming days, as hard as it may get, or as much as I would go insane from not having a productive schedule, feeling like I wasn't getting stuff done, that I was just stuck in one place, however long this debacle would take place, I had to live every day, every moment, to make it count, as if it were my last day on Earth. At least I didn't get pummeled by hundreds of pounds of light fixture debris, metal and glass and other artificial plastics, and yeah, I was a living, breathing human being, able-bodied, still able to walk, still able to talk and eat and enjoy the little fruits of life. And that mentality carried me a long way through a very, very troublesome period of time in between Act 1 and Act 2 of the Frontier Americana Tour. What was my plan going to be now for the next, who knows, however long? I only planned maybe 2 or 3 days at the Grand Canyon, and then I was off to Utah. I was going to go to Bryce Canyon. We were going to enjoy Zion. We were going to enjoy a state park with pink sand. Can you believe it? And I realized as the days came along, I probably wasn't going to be able to make it to those places. I was probably going to be lucky to even head to Colorado. I had to figure out how to make those days count. What was I supposed to do? I tried renting a car, which would have been great to take me to other parts of the Grand Canyon. It's a huge national park, and I was kind of in the bad part of the Grand Canyon. All I really had was a glorified convenience store, a number of bathrooms, and one view. Although it was a beautiful view, it was just one view for maybe an eighth of a mile walk. So it wasn't really much. I wanted to get a rental car, so my plan was to hitchhike my way to Flagstaff, because that was the nearest place at which one can get a rental car. I was planning to hitchhike my way down to the Flagstaff airport, and I hitchhiked. I had my thumb out, looking kind of like a fool, while all the other tourists from all over the world, might I say that, I got a chance to meet plenty of people from different countries, were enjoying their time. So what I mean by that is, you know, they're enjoying their time. They didn't have to pick me up. You know, they didn't have to give that act of kindness. It was their vacation. They're paying hundreds of dollars to come here and see these beautiful Grand Canyon sights. It's not their duty to help out some individual with bad circumstances, right? There was one woman who was willing to pick me up. And not just pick me up, but drop me off at the Flagstaff airport. I really only needed a ride to the nearest city. I think it was like Tucson or something like that. Not Tucson, down in the south, but there's a town right at the southern gate of the national park called Tucson. And I had a bus or a coach planned and booked. So I would just need to get to that place and get down to the airport to get a rental car. Didn't need to do that. She offered to drive me down all the way to Flagstaff, because I guess she was en route to some other place nearby. So, Trisha, if you ever see this, I am eternally grateful for that act of kindness you gave to some stranger. Port is nothing like your JFK or Chicago O'Hare, no. It's maybe like a 2-floor, got like 300 feet from one side to the other, a small flight of stairs bringing you up to like a balcony, and that's it. There was one restaurant, but it looked like it was closed most of the time, and there wasn't even a vending machine. It was very, very small, and well, I don't know if I was even allowed to sleep at the airport, but I did so anyway on a row of chairs. Very uncomfortable, probably my worst night of sleep in my life. But I made it to the morning because it was too late to get a rental car by the time 5 p.m., 6 p.m. rolled around. So I waited till the morning, and I was ready to get my rental car, right? I wasn't 21. And I thought, you know, I booked with Hertz, which has a 20 and up policy. I'm okay. All right, I can get a rental car. But there was something with the regulation or policy that didn't allow me to use the debit card I had. And for that, I was not allowed a rental car. I was devastated. You know, that was my one chance. I was trying to be proactive with the circumstances I was dealt, and I was dealt another blow. So things couldn't get any worse. I had to pay for a taxi all the way up to my spot at the Grand Canyon, and I didn't know what to do. I now know that I was not meant to get that rental car. I was not meant to enjoy my way, cheat my way, in fact, around this challenge. I was meant to take on this challenge head on, and whatever came, I was meant to experience it. So that's why you don't see anything in Utah on that grand trip except for arches. I wanted to visit Utah a little more intensively, but that was just not in the cards. That was just not how I was meant to spend this time. Something else of extraordinary importance that I want to share with you all is just something I can't help but remember. When I was at that Flagstaff airport, I was very cold, hungry, kind of miserable almost, just waiting for the hours to pass by or until I got tired enough to sleep. And there was a local flight that came in from somewhere local, maybe Phoenix or something. A group of people go by, walk to wherever they're meant to walk outside of the airport on the lower floor. I was on the balcony level. And this one man climbs up the stairs, comes to the row of chairs I'm trying to relax on, and I don't know how to describe him, but it was almost like me from 30 years in the future. Same hair color, same hat that I'm wearing now, same general fashion style. It was very much a coincidence. I know he's a real person, but like, I couldn't help but think, is this guy like me from decades in the future with much more wisdom than I do now? It was just very weird. And we really hit it off. We talked about various things like philosophy, religion, and it was just so weird. Like, almost as if he came up to deliver me a message from the future, as if he came from that plane 30 years in the future to come back to that moment and tell me, hey, things are tough, but work through it, get through the struggle, and you will learn tremendous amounts of wisdom. I don't know, it just, that maybe brief 15, 20-minute interaction really got me thinking. It was insane. Seriously, it was so weird. I was just at my lowest state, and this guy comes along as if he knows that he needs to deliver this message to me. I don't know how else I can describe it. It was just something, I don't know if it was a coincidence, because it's just, you know, it's a random guy, but it seemed like it was another one of those experiences, interactions that were just meant to happen for a very important, significant reason. So, Tucker, if you're ever watching this, you have really, really helped me. You may have noticed that I was just a bit sluggish or whatever, but I truly took that to heart, and I don't know, that was just a conversation I really needed to have at that moment. So thank you. I don't know, it's just fun to believe that things are larger than our sense of real-world probability, that things happen more than just realistic coincidence. So I like to believe that was one of those things. But anyway, fast forward, I am back at that Grand Canyon campground. And thanks to the great campground host who really was friendly and was just an overall great guy, I was allowed the emergency spot, not just for my scheduled 2-3 nights. So I'm very happy and thankful to the campground host who provided more than enough accommodation for truly an emergency. Honestly, I rightfully deserve that emergency spot. I think a day later or so comes one of my favorite days of that miserable experience of being stuck at that campground. I think a day later, after my failed attempt to get a rental car, comes one of the most wild days of my week-and-a-half long stint at Club Grand Canyon. There's a guy on a pedal bike, and he's biking across the whole world. Like, he started in Britain, he got his bike to the American continent, and he was traveling all across North America until he got to the coast, and I think he was on his way towards like Oceania or Asia or sometime. He was in need of a campground just like I was. And then comes a guy from Quebec. I think he's on a motorbike from North to South America. He's doing like a trans-American continent tour on a motorbike. He also needs a place to stay. Those two kind of get in a tiff with the campground host, which I kind of thought was a bit humorous. But long story short, they're in need, desperate need of a campground just for one night. So I thought, you know, I'm in a desperate position. Why not bring some good to the world by letting them stay at my campsite? You know, these are two strangers, but I knew that it was better to be hospitable and welcoming, just like how I have been treated on previous tours, you know, and so far on this tour. So I invite them, and they make their home, and they're quick to pitch their tent and relax, and the British guy offers me and the Quebecois guy a couple bottles of wine that he got at the convenience store. So later that night, we're just having a great time drinking those bottles of wine, exchanging stories. It's kind of like one of those jokes where XYZ walk into a bar, something happens. I don't know. It's like, what do you get when an American who's stuck in the Grand Canyon, a British guy on a bike through the world, and a Quebecois guy who's traveling across the different continents. They all meet up at a certain place on one day under the beautiful night sky. Oh, and the Grand Canyon sky was amazing. You could see stars for your whole view. And we were right next to a little secret trail that would give us a view of the Grand Canyon that was just unlike anything normal tourists stopping by would see. It was a very secret, secluded area. So we were just in such a state of euphoria. The wine definitely helped, but we were just having so much fun for that one night. Next morning, I said goodbye to them. It was just one of those once-in-a-lifetime experiences I won't forget. And then the afternoon after, I try my hand at walking just to see if I can record on a nearby local trail about a mile away. It was the best thing I could hope to discover. And there's an Argentinian guy, a little older than me, who's in a car, and he notices me walking, and he's like, "Do you need a ride, man? I could take you through the Grand Canyon." I was more than happy, and we hit it off once again, and it was another once-in-a-lifetime experience. So many once-in-a-lifetime experiences. I have trouble conceptualizing now the idea of a once-in-a-lifetime experience because given certain circumstances, given your openness to try new things, you could have so many once-in-a-lifetime experiences. So thank you, Juan, for guiding me around. That video of the Grand Canyon would not be possible if it wasn't for my man Juan. Thank you so much for taking me around. I'm having so many great experiences during the period of time that I should be miserable and stuck and stranded and feeling hopeless. How neat is that, right? And all of these fun experiences and interactions would not have occurred if I was just able to go on my merry way to the next destination with a car that was fixed and had great transmission. It's weird how those things work. Sometimes you need bad circumstances to give yourself those other unexpected great experiences. As much as I struggled personally, internally during that time, if I had it any other way, I wouldn't. I would rather have gone through the same experience again and gone through those same fun experiences in that period of time and have learned so much more about myself through those periods of struggle. And I talk so often on these epilogue videos about these fun campfire experiences. There was no fire, but I finally got to deliver one of my own. I finally got to be that hospitable person welcoming people into my abode. And that meant a lot to me. I could sort of return the favor when I've been dealt pretty nice hospitality in the past. But as a week turns into a week and a half, which approaches 2 weeks, those fun days are long over. Most of those days were spent just lounging, kind of trying to avoid this direct sunlight from inside my trailer. It was kind of a boring time those last few days. So how do I escape? How do I escape this circumstance and head to the next act of this Frontier Americana Tour? Well, this is something I feel a bit awkward to explain because, I'm a young man blossoming into adulthood. I want to be responsible and independent and being able to figure out solutions to problems on my own, right? And it's hard to admit that sometimes you need to rely on other people. So that's when my father comes in, once again to the story. I'm in contact with my father, and we're talking about how it's taking longer than expected to have the car fixed, right? So then my dad suggests, what if I just buy a truck? I've always wanted to buy a truck, and, I could just fly down to Phoenix, take another flight to Flagstaff, buy the truck in Flagstaff, and drive it up to the Grand Canyon, pick you up, hitch it to the trailer, go and drive to the Flagstaff airport, and you can drop me off there. I'll get a flight back home. And that was the last case scenario I wanted. I would rather have felt like I failed on my mission on my own through my own, adversity that I caused upon myself than, succeed but at the mercy of people helping me. And I guess that's sort of like the young man adult coming out saying, I don't want to be taken care of anymore. It's hard for, a son to want to be coddled by the helping hand of family members. That's the problem. That was the conflict I was having. I didn't want to... I really felt guilty about it, honestly. But then he assured me, no, you have to finish this adventure. This is your adventure. You got here all the way to Arizona. And once you get the truck and you're able to continue forth, it'll continue to be your adventure until you get home. And, you know, I had mixed emotions. I still feel very mixed on the decision that we both came to, but he helped me out. He rescued me. And as much as I would have preferred to say, oh, I fixed everything on my own, sometimes I have to accept that that can't always be the case. Sometimes I have no choice but to rely on other people. And that's where I learned to accept my limits as one individual with limited resources. So that's exactly what happened. He flew down and the truck was purchased and something beautiful came out of that. He did say he wanted to visit the Grand Canyon. That was the one place he had left on his bucket list. And we got to wake up to a beautiful morning over the canyon. And that's an experience I will never, ever forget. Dad, I don't say it often at all, but I really love you. Thank you so much. So for the rest of the trip, I was using that truck that was purchased in Arizona. I want to think of it as if I'm driving it back home for him, but I still had lots of other destinations to get through before I was able to return home. And that's what I realized. Another thing that is just meant to happen. I was meant to go through that experience in the Grand Canyon because that would have been the easiest point at which I would have been stuck. I realized with the level of terrain, the steep mountainous terrain of the other future states, the Volvo absolutely would not have made it, and I probably would have been stranded in more dire straits than a place that at least had a convenience store or a tourist area, or, you know, it wasn't the worst place to get stranded, I'll admit. I wasn't in the Grand Canyon. I was right at the place with enough amenities. It was actually gently used. The motor worked fine. But as I went to Utah, as I got to Arches National Park, there was some serious battery trouble. Luckily, the problem was much easier to fix. All it took was a simple battery change at some auto parts store. Knowing that I overcame that major obstacle, I felt like I could tackle any subsequent challenge that came my way. It was a series of growth experiences along that leg of the trip. You like to think these dealerships check for every nook and cranny on the truck, but you know, it's okay if a dealership wants to sell a customer a truck with a dead battery, you know. Fun things happen like that. Throughout the second act, I met some great other people. I was in Monument Valley and I was gifted a book called Killing Lions, which is a great read for anybody my age, going through those periods of transition from child to adult. It's a great book. Thank you, Jared, who I met. He was a great guy, great family man, as I noticed, and I'm glad to have been campground neighbors with him in Monument Valley. I got to meet up with a friend I was networking with online for a long time. Klaus, if you're watching this, it was great seeing your hometown in Colorado. In Minnesota, all the way over in Minnesota, a few weeks later, I got to have some fun at a campground bar, my first campground bar experience. And now, although I didn't indulge in any alcohol, I wasn't old enough at the time, I sure made the most of socializing with the proud, salt-of-the-earth folk of Minnesota. And that's it. That covers the entire journey internally that I went through off camera of the Frontier Americana Tour. What I learned, just to summarize it once again, it's okay to be flawed. It's okay to not feel like everything is under your control. We all like to be independent people, but sometimes it's okay when you truly need it to ask for help. Now, I'm not advocating for people to just, you know, have people help them every which way, every possible occurrence, you know. I think it's a good thing for people my age to learn how to do things on their own and be independent people. But when you truly need it, and I've come to understand this myself through that experience, it's okay. You can ask for assistance. Now, you guys believe what you want. I'm not into the whole proselytization of people's beliefs or whatever, but after this last trip, it's hard for me to even question the existence of God anymore. I definitely believe that it was nothing short of a holy miracle that I got through this trip alive and well, and things somehow went in the place that they went for everything to work out. For those of you who believe there is no God, there is no absolute higher power, we are the creators of our own destiny and stuff. Feel free to believe what you want, but before you solidify your true beliefs about the world around us and what lies beyond, have your own Frontier Americana Tour. But that's gonna do it. I learned a lot. I hope by sharing this story with you all that you guys got not only entertainment but a little bit of insight. Speaking of understanding one's limits, this trip was insanely long. I'm glad we did it, but it's just a little too long. I think I can do a much better job in one concentrated region in less time than in the entire country spanning 2.5 months. I can do it, but I'd rather not in the future. This trip currently is around the size of the Southeast tour. A little bit more reasonable, I would say. There's something to be said about a healthy balance between an adrenaline rush and a period of rest for monotony. And that's what we try to apply here on this experience. And so having learned that, I think I'm better able to apply that on this trip than, yeah. So that'll do it. Frontier Americana Tour Epilogue. Epilogue 9 in the books. Have fun with this long piece of content. This is a long epilogue, but I think it's worth it. It's necessary to tell the entire story, start to finish. I expended the entire camera battery from full to now it's pretty empty just on this one video. So this little battery's gotta charge a bit. So I'm gonna end it off here looking at a beautiful stretch of forest. Ooh, where are we today? I guess you'll have to figure out someday. More travels to come. I will see you at the next location.